Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. The webinar will start right now. I'm Margot. I'm your host for today. In this webinar, Jos Gilissen will share with you what exactly the self-driven back office is, how it can be implemented in your company, and also what the benefits are. Jos is the main lead finance and business controlling at Delaware and expert in the self-driven back office. He also oversees our offerings for this solution. We will have some time at the end of this webinar for a Q&A. So should you have any questions, please send them to me, Margot, in the chat box, and we'll certainly try to address a few of them at the end of this webinar. Welcome, Jos. Welcome, everyone, and let's get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Also from my side, welcome to the webinar, the self-driven back office. My name is Jos Gilissen. First of all, perhaps on the title. So on the left-hand side, we've got the self-driven and then the back office. So the self-driven, probably for most of us, this makes the links to the self-driven cars, not to name Tesla, for instance, as one of them. Well, the idea of the self-driven back office is quite identical, is quite similar. The question is, how can we leverage today's IT capabilities that are available in order to increase the effectiveness of the back office processes, for instance, by enhancing activities currently performed by humans, but also by using technology levers to augment human activities in these supporting processes. And secondly, the objective is to increase efficiencies, meaning to take over activities that are handled currently still by humans in these support processes, in these back office processes. And that concerns almost always manual, recurring, low to non-value adding activities that are in scope at that moment. The second part of the title refers to the back office, and the purpose of this webinar, or in general, is not to engage in a discussion on which functions belong to which part of the value chain, but it's rather to reflect that this concerns rather administrative processes, where there's still a lot of manual activities ongoing at the moment. Hence also the reason why, for instance, on the left-hand side, we've got operation mentioned. From a value chain perspective, this is different. Put things in context, today, if we look to the left-hand side of the screen, of the slide, most organizations are already engaged in rolling out all types of applications or systems. Think of ERP systems, for instance, for core finance and logistics functionalities. Often they are complemented with function-specific applications. You can see HR, CRM for the sales and marketing area as well. And even in most cases, we see a number of quite bespoke, customized applications. All of them aimed actually at creating or a competitive advantage, at least on the short term, potentially. But in most cases also in order to standardize processes and hence increase efficiencies throughout the organizations. The result or the reality, however, is actually twofold. Yes, there are automated processes that brought efficiencies without any doubt. However, we often do see still a lot of or a considerable amount of manual activities that take place within the various parts of the processes. And secondly, also important, is in the end result, we get into a kind of a hybrid landscape, driving the need to work and also transfer and manage data across multiple applications within this landscape. Both, I must say, on a local as well as on a global level. So that's the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we've got the innovative space. What's new is actually what's called the digital revolution. You can see over there industry of Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, AR, VR, ecosystems, as well as new business models that are being brought forward. And what's equally important in this innovative space is that most of these elements become really affordable nowadays. Another trend that we see as well is that the innovative parts that are being brought forward are also, I must say, slowly get embedded in the run component as well. So artificial intelligence, for instance, gets embedded into ERP system. But what's remarkable is that the pace of both sides of the coin in this case is clearly quite different. Given these are proven to be successful via use cases, as mentioned, as the innovative enablers are getting more and more affordable, that is definitely something that's not too far away for a mid-sized company in Belgium. Now, in order to succeed in combining success on both sides, in the run and the innovative space, you need to have a digital strategy. That's actually what's meant at the bottom half. So first of all, you need to have a strategy, you need to have the execution to deliver, and you need to have the capability or the ability to support digital projects once they go live. For this session, for this webinar, we will focus on the execution part only. Strategy and support parts are also some elements that we address, but that's subject to another topic. So let's have a look at the innovation clusters on the right-hand side. Within Delaware, we actually work actively on 8 innovation clusters, as we call them. We got, starting from the left-hand corner, big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. We got bots and robotic process automation. We also work on asset tracking, mixed reality, humanoids, intelligent apps, blockchain, and industrial Internet of Things. But for the purpose of the self-driven back office, we focus on big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning on one hand, and on the other hand, on applications or use cases where we use bots and robotic process automation on the other side. So let's have a look at the first cluster on big data and artificial intelligence and machine learning, sorry. And let's see to what extent they do have an impact on the existing business processes within the self-driven back office. So zooming in on big data, AI and ML, this is typically the area where the data science come into picture, where algorithms are being developed, machine learning capabilities come into play, all of them to benefit the support processes. Other capabilities used by our data scientists go into the direction of NLP, RoboVisions, and other technology-enabled drivers. And on the slide here, you can see on the top and on the bottom a number of use cases that we have in this area. And for the purpose of this webinar, it's also important to mention that we will only use internal cases. So we don't use any customer cases. Customer cases are available on our websites or can be discussed in one-to-one sessions, but for the purpose of this webinar, we will stick with the internal cases. The first case into where we use algorithms, part of artificial intelligence and machine learning capability, is in the finance area. Problem statement, perhaps to start with that one. At a certain moment, there was a feeling amongst the partners, especially, but also from an external perspective, that we didn't have sufficient insights in our position, due to uncertainties linked to customer behavior payments. So there was an uncertainty about the cash. There were higher short-term loans required in order to compensate for that one. And equally, we were relatively slow in response to late payments if these occurs. Now, how did we work on that one? It's actually a process that initially goes quite fast. So the first step in this type of engagement is to define the problem statement. It's sliced into small elements. Delaware is a project organization, meaning that although we have a number of recurring customers, a significant part, on the other hand, is also related to new business. So that's part of the problem statement that need to be sliced and diced. After the problem statement, we identified the data resources that were needed, going from project master data, customer master data, billing information, of course, CRM information that we all have available. And then we went into a data modeling exercise. All those 3 steps go relatively fast. We speak in terms of a number of days. And then it's up to the exploration of the first iteration results. All right, the first iteration results amended up to 65%. Right, which is not too impressive at that moment, and which brings us up to, or with the characteristics for these projects in this space as well, and namely that it's quite an iterative process in order to get to the detail, to the delivered solution. So we went into a detailed process analysis. We added some additional sources, for instance, work in progress as a data source, and then we ended up in a result of 75%, which is still not satisfying enough, which will lead us to another iteration in this area, for instance, in customer segmentation, or trying to include as well the impact of project quality into the algorithm, and brainstorming equally on other external data sources that we still could use. So up to now, we're up to 75% statistics-wise. And after the project, we have a reduced uncertainty, we have lower short-term roads, and we have a fast detection possible of non-payment. But what's even more important, I think, is that at this moment as well, we have a better managed collection process due to the fact that we have some insights into the customer behavior as far as payment of invoices is received. I recently got a question on what the effective deliverable is in case of this artificial intelligence or machine learning project. Well, actually, as you can see here, it's a model with algorithms that has been trained, that has been developed and trained, and that provides you with the identification of parameters as well as correlations and self-learning capabilities as well. Now, in this space, this is the internal case as mentioned before. We have other examples in the finance space. For instance, everybody, I think, is quite anxious to have the support of computer technology in reconciliations and settlements of incoming customer payments. But equally, if we go, for instance, in the HR domain, we have examples of competence matching exercises by means of technology or algorithms, CV screening opportunities. In Delaware, we recruit on average one person a day, which means that there's quite a lot of time spent in analyzing CVs. For this one, our data scientists have developed an algorithm to support actually the HR department in that one, but equally in other areas like planning, forecast, scheduling elements, where algorithms and technology in general can play a role. Some lessons learned on this topic, two actually. Data availability, so sizing matters. The more data we've got, the better we can develop an algorithm, and more importantly, the better we can train the algorithm as well. So that's the first one. And the second one is in general getting up to 70, 80, 85%, depending on the topic, accuracy or satisfaction goes relatively fast. It's relatively easy, I would say. Filling the gap afterwards from 80% to 90% or to 98%, that's more an iterative approach, as I just mentioned. That takes more time and takes more analysis, process analysis as well, to get to the upper limits of the upper score, sorry, of the 98%. Okay, moving on to the second cluster, more specifically into the area of bots. And also here on the screen, you can see a couple of, in this case, customer cases that came around. But let's first have a look at bots as a technology element. I think everybody by now is already familiar with bots, especially in the B2C space, where we have by means of e-commerce, almost all ordering processes nowadays are to some extent providing assistance or even a bit more supported in order to assure you that you make the right choice. And when we can trust Gartner from a predictive perspective, this will only increase over the upcoming months, actually. By 2020, the average person will have more conversations with bots than with their spouse. And by 2020, equally, customers will manage 85% of their relationship with a business without interacting with a human. Now, in both cases, it's a 2020 number. That's quite impressive. I mean, today we're 2019, so this is only a couple of months away that we should get used in interacting with bots. So let's look at an example to make things a bit tangible. An example as well, once again, an internal example, but that's not that uncommon, I think, for most of you. It's related to a case where a user gets logged. In this case, as the demo will show you in a minute, it's an SAP user that gets logged. And at that moment, assistance is provided by Marie-Claire. That's the name of the bot, and she will walk you through the different steps. Step 2, choose your SAP system. In step 3, an authentication, of course, is required. So also segregation of duty and access constraints are considered in here. Moving up to step 4, finally, answer some security questions. In the BMW, for instance, is a most famous car, but equally on your favorite food and so forth. All this is done by a bot, and then Marie-Claire is asked to reset the password. Yeah. Once this is done, the user can try this one. Can use the URL, reset its password, and off we go. All right, so we've seen that in this case, the bot facilitates actually the dialogue between a human and in this case, a computer to resolve a certain problem. Also in this case, other cases, for instance, in procurement, in ordering office supplies and checking supplier invoices status are pretty well cases to demonstrate the added value in bots. Of course, HR domain, especially in the employee, the internal side, the Q&A side is quite common, so-called day-to-day questions for our employees. But equally, we have developed bots to guide the public into information on publicly available websites and to facilitate the search process in that domain. Lessons learned, if we talk about bots, actually the main one is that there is quite a difference between internal and external communication flows, and that's more from a learning and less development, but more from a learning perspective. Internal communication, if there's a small hiccup left or right, that can be handled with. External communication, of course, as all times have to be right from the first time. So that takes a little bit more effort than compared to internal communication flows. So that's the main lessons we got there. So all in all, on bots, it's well known. It's all over the place. Great stuff, I would say. But I personally think it's especially interesting if we combine these robots or these bots with RPA, with robotic process automation. Which brings us to the last technology driver, if you want, robotic process automation. And you can see a robot playing the piano, and it's quite literally what RPA does at that moment. This is a pancarte that was made during one of the previous sessions that we did specifically on RPA on that. It says machines are taking over the accounting department, but once again, RPA is applicable in all types of processes, especially on administrative processes. So the what is defined at the center of the slide. First of all, and perhaps even most important, RPA is a software, right? But it's what we call a non-invasive software, meaning that there is no impact on existing applications. We work via user interfaces, so there is no impact, no direct impact at least, on existing data models. It's only values that get transferred in or out. And it can do, as it is mentioned in the middle, it can work with, especially work with structured data. That's what the real benefit is. If we talk about uploading, downloading structured information, we can process activities independent from the application. So whatever landscape you're in, once you've got a login ID, the robot can do it. So basically the statement is, if a user can do it, so the robot can, especially if it's rule-based. Secondly, you also see elements like image recognition, pattern recognition, combined with best practices on keystrokes. All these functionalities are available in today's automation software. What's even more important, there's an evolution, a strong evolution, a fast evolution in the RPA scene. And actually, most of them today can also work with unstructured data, at least to a certain extent. Then we talk about using OCR. To read, if you want, between brackets, PDF files and convert them into the unstructured data into structured data. The rare on the right-hand side of the screen, once again, it's related to administrative processes. The sweet spot is actually in the back office processes where the majority of the use cases can be found back. Why? That's on the left-hand side, and this brings us back to the benefits, right? There are quite a lot of number of them. Standardized processes is actually twofold compared to standardized processes. So standardized processes are ideal actually to use RPA to automate the processes. But on the other hand, RPA can also be an enabler to standardized processes, for instance, on a global level, because then resources are being made available centrally by means of robots or software, and it's independent of wage categories or salary categories where in the world as well. Improved accuracy is definitely an advantage that we see. Cost reduction in the end as well, because technology has matured, prices has come down, so the business case is more obvious, or even more obvious than it used to be, and especially short lead times in developing and setting it up. I will come back to that in a minute. Last thing I want to mention is the free up resources for future growth. So everybody is looking for talent, is looking for resources. So the robots, the digital worker, if you want, is a means to perform more added value by the people around, and to move the non-added value, or the low added value, sorry for that, into the robots side at that moment. Some specifics about robotic process automation, but because based on the description, one could argue it's all about integrating interfaces that are being wrapped up. Especially the scope are into manual activities that involve predefined rules and parameters, as I mentioned before. So any type of decision tree that can be followed by a human being can be configured within the RPA software as well. And what's very specific is that it requires access to multiple systems. And that's really the big advantage where it is. On the left-hand side, you can see we often, or most in the cases, we use email communication, we use ERP systems, we use business warehouse environments, we upload, we download information, we put it temporarily on a SharePoint environment, we use the Microsoft Office suite. All of these are used in one workflow to facilitate the automation of the process from an end-to-end perspective. Just a short video because we're running out of time. The video you see is using an email communication, is using Microsoft Excel, and is using SharePoint as well, together with SAP in this case. And it involves a simple case of dispute management, where sales agents in this case do not have access to the core ERP system. In the specific example, the robot is being provided by emails by the sales agents with an update of the actions they have undertaken for all the disputes that were open. The robot will open the email, which has a predefined subject or description, will open the email, will store it somewhere for reference later on, and will then process the data in the ERP system, as it was mentioned in the Excel. As mentioned before, one of the benefits is this robot doesn't make mistake. If we have 69 in the Excel, it will put in 69 instead of 96, for instance, in the SAP as well, at all times. It's pretty boring to watch if you have to follow it, but right, that's what we do nowadays in updating the ERP systems coming from different sites. Process design and approach. This slide is not meant for you to read the details. It's actually blurred on purpose. It's just to indicate from a process design as well as from approach how it looks like an RPA engagement. So we've got red and gray boxes in here. We got the notion of sprints, and the sprints indicate the approach, right? It's really an agile based approach. You work in sprints of 1, 2, 3 weeks maximum. Based on which one you will automate parts of the process. And the different boxes and the different color shading actually indicated the as is and to be. The as is are all the boxes together, and the to be, you can see that the used to be red boxes, which are performed by humans, are now taken over by a robot. So in this case, it's an end-to-end process in the procurement area. It's quite impressive, all the administrative tasks that now are taken over by robots, whereas the human expertise is used to make decisions, to make valuable decisions along the chain of the procurement process. Use cases, very short. I'll come back to this one in our approach as well. We've got them in the finance area, HR, IT, procurement, quality, whether it's back office or not, it doesn't matter. Usually they have bespoke or dedicated systems that need to be interfaced with the core system. Sales and marketing as well, if we go into CRM, or product customizations, for instance. Lessons learned to wrap up the RPA space as well. Preparation is key. So if you master your processes in detail, the automation will also be fast and quite successful. Standardized processes or sub-processes, I mentioned that before. It can be an enabler to standardized processes, or you can use RPA to automate standardized processes as well. Documentation is key, especially because more and more the robot will take over parts of the process at least. And then the so-called key users, they kind of lose grip on what actually happens in the process. So at all times, communication is key. A pragmatic approach, right? It goes, the bases are within agile development, but it's more about engaging and collaborating with the people. Governance in the end is also important, right? Remember the strategy, the execution part, and the support part. All components have to be in place. And then in the end, the feedback we received so far is the speed of implementation. So in general, an RPA project takes between 3 to 4 weeks of lead time before moving up to production, which is compared to the typical interfacing exercise. It's quite impressive from that perspective. This brings us almost to the end of the webinar. To wrap up, how do we engage with the self-driven back office? It's basically our famous D, which represents our methodology. And the key of the methodology is actually on phase 2 and phase 3, inspire and ideate. That's where we do that by means of a workshop, usually functional organized, for instance, within the HR community, within the IT community, or within the finance community, where we first of all explain to the audience, and the audience are all users and key users, that they actually work on a daily basis on the topics. We inform them on the definition of RPA, the capabilities of RPA, and equally we inform them what RPA is not about, for instance. And we can extend that to the larger community of what we just saw with artificial intelligence, with machine learning capability, with bots. And then we go into this 3 to 4 hours workshop where we generate or co-create actually ideas where opportunities for automation arise. And it's quite impressive, I would say, interesting. On average, we get around 25 to 30 ideas by function. So it's really a pretty interesting dynamic, as we would say. After that one, after phase 3, we have a methodology to assess the proposals, the ideas from a quality perspective and from a benefit perspective, in order to compile a roadmap to implement technology-enabled innovations or automations in that manner, which then rolls out into a blueprint for the pilot project, the execution of the pilot project. And as mentioned before, after that, we go into an implementation, rollout, and support phases as well. On the left-hand side, you see the typical stakeholders involved in the process: business process owners, definitely, process analysts, and IT, of course, because in the end, we need the governance as well. So this is about it for the webinar. I just see one question coming into play. What platform do you use most of the time? WorkFusion, Blue Prism? Well, actually, it's a very good question, because as I mentioned before, especially for RPA, because I think the question is related to RPA in this case, that's quite a mature software branch as we speak. So my guess is that we have currently around 25 to 30 suppliers of the software, of the automation software, robotic process automation. Today within Delaware, we support 2 platforms. Which is on the one hand a self-service platform. It's called Service Trace. So that's really when the idea or the objective of the automation is to put that in the functions, being a HR function, a finance function, and where IT is solely meant to support the processes. The other one is more into the situations where IT is in the lead, and it's used or the expertise is built within IT. And then we have UiPath as one of the leading RPA providers as well. SAP is coming, or has recently announced end of last year, to acquire, or they have acquired Contextor as well, which is a third platform, but they will come with more information in the second half of 2019.
All right. Thank you very much, Jos. And thank you to all of you for joining us. Make sure to keep an eye on your mailbox, because we will still send you the recording of this webinar in the following days, in case you'd like to share it with one of your colleagues or maybe have another look at it. Should you have any further questions, or if you want to discuss the options for your company, please reach out to us via the email that's at the bottom of the screen, or via our website, delaware.pro, and we wish you all a very lovely afternoon.